So here we are, episode 58 of the Mainly Stoopid podcast. We have a very special guest, friend of my family's, one of, I'll call her a pioneer of female aviators, following a long line of aviators in her family, and just an overall awesome person. We have Sali Gear joining us. Huey is the co-host, is always here. And also joining in with God knows what is my father. So this should be interesting. So I hope you guys like it. But we'll just get right down to it. Welcome, Sali. How are you?
Thanks. Hey, thanks for having me. And be nice to your dad. He and I go way back. Small kids fishing. Fishing in Cape Nether River.
So Sali, I guess we'll start off with where did it all start? You know, where'd you grow up? How'd you get to it?
So it's funny how I ended up in Maine, but sadly enough, I'm one of six. Well, that's not the sad part, but I'm one of six kids, and the second to the youngest, beating out my twin brother by 4.5 minutes. So my dad was killed in an aviation accident when he was CO of a squadron in Sanford, Florida, which is right next to Orlando. And I was 13 months old. And my oldest sibling, my sister, was 15. So 15 to 13 months, my mom was widowed with 6 kids. My dad was killed in January, and it rocked the community he was in, the vigilante community, because he was one of the first Navy test pilots, and he actually died aboard an aircraft carrier doing landings with a plane that he, as a test pilot, didn't feel should be out there, the vigilante. It had a really long fuselage, and it has different variants. In fact, it was actually the early variant to what would become the F-14, but the fuselage was really long, so that relates to instability issues. And if you have ever looked at the deck of an aircraft carrier, there's no room for mistakes. That being said, he'd already done a series of day landings at touch and goes and traps, which was when you'd come to a full stop on an aircraft carrier. And he was going to be doing some night landings, and had actually called my mom, shipped ashore, who's off the North Carolina coast. So she talked to him that afternoon. And she was a little concerned about how he was feeling, and I guess he assuaged her mind with that he was okay. But anyway, he ended up having what's called a ramp strike, and by that, the back of an aircraft carrier is a ramp, and the deck is angled so that if a plane was to continue off or do a touch and go, or what they call a bolter, where on an aircraft carrier, the planes are stopped by what's called a tail hook that is extended down from the airplane, and it goes down with the landing gear. And that's everything. So when you land on an aircraft carrier, there are 4 wires. Ideally, you want to hook the 3rd wire. But sometimes the tail hook, which is big metal piece, that attach to the airplane, might bounce. You might get a hook skip. You might just land long. I mean, we're talking, you have variation to go from 1 to 4 is less than 18 inches of height on your airplane. And then that is combined not just with height, but of course lineup and stuff. So, and remember, the aircraft carrier's moving, so it's making wind across the deck. And then if there were waves, and George, you know all about this, you have pitch and roll combined with that. So it's basically landing on a moving runway. So long story that I didn't mean to make so long, short, my dad had a ramp strike where basically the wheels were sheared and the plane went over the edge and off the angled deck. And they always have helos that are launched, that are out there, but he went off. He never attempted ejection. So the plat tapes, what we call platform tapes, every aircraft landing is recorded. And with my time in service and people I knew, I was able to use my connections, and I was able to view the plat tapes of my dad. And I can just tell you, he was slumped over. So the feeling is he had a heart attack before he landed, because he never responded to, there's always a landing safety officer. He never responded to the power calls that the landing safety officer gave him. So we don't know that, because we never recovered the plane or his body. He ended up going in the deep trench that's off of the Carolinas, about 90 miles off the coast, is a trench that goes down 3 miles, and that's where he rested. So he never recovered. So we can only assume what happened. But so that's the beginning of what would become our journey as a family without a dad. So my mom didn't know where to go. She was originally from Maine, and her only sibling lived, Kim Stanwood, lived in York. And so my mom decided she would go be where family was. So she showed up in the summertime and bought a big house right there in York, built in 1720. And it was right in York. It had a barn, and it was within, my mom looked at it and said it's within walking distance to the schools and everything, because my mom was the only one that could drive at the time, and she was a nurse. So as much as we wanted to live out in the country, kind of where you guys are, the situation with the number of kids and access to facilities predicated that we live in town. But my mom, always being the interesting person that she was, showed up and went to, my dad had been stationed in White Sands as a test pilot in right outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we had a ranch. And we had 24 ponies and donkeys. So my mom went to New Mexico and took a 2-horse trailer, and in that 2-horse trailer, she put 2 ponies and her favorite donkey. And there we sat in York, and I can't even think of like what the people of York, I mean, I wasn't old enough to gauge their feelings, but I can imagine there's a lot of stories that were going around, and probably still are, about my mom and us living there right in the middle of town. So that's where I grew up, in York, with my siblings, and had a great life, very simple, not, there wasn't there's a lot of family, there wasn't a lot of things, but I think there's something to be said for that. But I will tell you, of the 6 kids, my mom raised 3 of us. 3 of them went into the military, and 3 went into medicine. So I think, George, I think you're at my mom's funeral. I mean, we referred to her as a force multiplier, which is a term we use in the Navy. When you take assets like Navy SEALs and stuff, and because of how they can project themselves, I mean, there's added synergy to what they can do. So we call those kind of things force multipliers. So I always called my mom a force multiplier. So, but that was the beginning of my journey. So to be honest with you, I went into the military and into flying. I didn't do it as a kid or anything, and I think I was just like a lot of young ladies are, and young kids in general. But I was like looking. I mean, George knew me through those years. I mean, I was a good kid. I wasn't bad. I wasn't in trouble, but
She's a wild
definitely. I would say I would take the road less traveled, and the journey was there were switchbacks and stuff, good hiking stuff in my life and in my plans. But in the end, when I decided what I wanted to do, I did it with a real conviction, and decided I wanted to go in the Navy. So I did that. I went to University of Florida, and I went to York High School, and then my last 2 years were in a prep school in Andover, Massachusetts. And then I went to not the Naval Academy, but I actually went to 6 different colleges and ended up at University of Florida with my twin brother. And there I did ROTC and buckled down and just dove into the academics and becoming a pilot, or what I wanted to be was a pilot. You don't know, that's the thing. You get your commissioning, you don't know what you're going to get. So I was already obligated to go in the service. But right. I had a brother that was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, and another brother that was surface, and then a brother-in-law that was a pilot. So and they had done the academy and ROTC and stuff. So, I mean, the military wasn't foreign to me. And even though my dad wasn't present, he was very big, and my mom, he was very big in our lives. And even when my mom remarried, and my dad was still just, he was a huge force in my life, and my mom, always cited things he did. So I felt like he was always a part of my life, but flying, I think, just gave me a chance to find him. I know that sounds a little weird, but I just was looking for him. I think I just wanted to identify with this man who, had birthed these great kids, and, and this woman, and I just wanted to go find out who he was. And I realize I'm talking a lot, but I remember when that moment it transitioned from it being his journey and my journey. And it was at the Floribama coast. I was on a little my solo in the T-34 Bravo. It's like a Mentor. It's a little training. It's a training plane we do. And understand, I had never done any flying, private flying before I went in the Navy. And I remember like flying back, and it was really hazy and stuff. And it's almost like you can't even see like a mile. But I remember, like, I always felt like he was always there in the cockpit with me and on my shoulder. And I just knew at that moment, like I had arrived, and I said, you know, out loud to nobody except maybe him, feeling like he was there. I said, okay, Dad, I got this. I know I am here. Thank you. And just keep, you know, stay on my shoulder. So anyway, that was the beginning of flying. I wanted to fly jets. So you get into flight school, which was a great honor, but you don't know what you're going to get until your grades come out. And it's based on two things: class standing, and you don't even know who you're going to graduate with. So you don't even know who the competition is. And oh, by the way, there are 3 other squadrons, so you don't even know like who's graduating. And so I wanted jets, but it's grades and it's class. It's needs of the Navy, always needs of the Navy. Well, I knew there were letting women into the jet pipeline, the full combat jet pipeline. And there were going to be 6 women allowed, and I was one of them. So that's the pioneer part, I think. Just to be clear, that there were women before me. I mean, I'm not talking about the WASP and stuff. There were always those women, you know, the ones that broke ground. And then there were women in the Navy aviation program that weren't in the combat pipeline. And even after me, there are women that do things. But, you know, pioneers are not just one person on one journey. There's a whole trail of them. So, you know, I was one of many, and I tip my hat to those before me, and, you know, and I tip my hat to those who came after me and who benefited from what I did for them. But I think gratitude probably is the catchword for all of us women, you know, that have been on these paths before. We all know we owe a debt of gratitude to the women who did it right, you know, because it takes like one misstep and people are looking for you to fail. I mean, I hate to say that, but, you know, there were those that were on the sidelines rooting for you, and those were the sidelines, you know, waiting for you to trip and fall. So anyway.
Well, and I think too, it's not even a trip and fall. It's just kick the rock in the wrong spot. You know, you're under a microscope.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And, you know, to be that trailblazer and to, you know, make that ultimate goal, it says a lot about, you know, not only just your character growing up, but also what you have behind you, and, you know, keeping that goal in mind at all times. It's like, you know, you are a trailblazer.
You know what's funny though, Garrett? Like people say, I mean, you know, like I always look at people and go, like, what differentiates from people who like do something with their lives and those who like maybe do less than something, don't reach their full potential? And you know what it was for me? It's weird, but it was like my family, I didn't want to disappoint them. I did not want to let my family down. My mom raised us, and I kind of see this, I mean, not to like spy on but I see that with your family, Garrett, and I don't know yours, but I just see how like your wife, you've got such a tight unit there. And I think that's so cool, because a lot of people are disconnected. And, you know, before you started the podcast, we talked about a little bit about this with COVID, you know, that if nothing else, I mean, for all the suck factor that we have with this, the cool thing is that it's a reset, and that we can, maybe people are like tuning into their families and spending time with their families and being present, you know, with their families. And I'm hoping that carries on, because that was the kind of leadership and presence that my family had in my life that made me who I am. It's genetics to a certain extent, but environment. I mean, my mother created an environment where she instilled in us that, you know, lovers and friends will come and go, but your family's always there. And, you know, you need to represent and make them proud and do the right thing, if not for yourself, at times for them. So And I think that's really what kept me on the straight and narrow path. So.
At least you stayed on the straight and narrow.
Straight and narrow.
I took a much harder path.
Well, I mean, listen. I have stories, but they're not for this podcast. And I'm just telling you.
My wife already threatened me not to tell any. So we're good.
About me, George? Oh no. I was, before you showed up, before I knew you were coming, I was like, oh wait, I could tell you some stories about your dad. But anyway.
So, at this time when you're becoming one of those 6 women into the combat pipeline, what year was this? When was this going down?
So 1984. So women had been in the jet pipeline, but they didn't do the full syllabus. So again, there's usually a trigger for everything, right? A trigger event. So the trigger for women going into combat was, and I feel like disrespectful that her name escapes me, but because I wasn't following it. I was too busy trying to get good grades and stuff. But there was a woman who was flying jet and got in an inverted flat spin and couldn't recover. And women at that time were not going through the out-of-control flight syllabus. They weren't doing aircraft carrier landings. They weren't doing bombing. They weren't doing air combat maneuvering. They were doing, I think they're doing formation, but they were like 4 or 5 big phases out of the jet pipeline that they were not doing because they weren't going in combat. So the syllabus I went through was the combat syllabus. So right now, were women allowed in combat? No, but that's another story. During my time, and with another trigger event, women would be had the doors open for combat. Again, another trigger event. It wasn't the right trigger, but it happened. But the women, they decided, they said, well, we can't have another fatality based on the fact that we didn't give all the training. So they put women through the full pipeline. And I think we're coming up this summer, it'll be a year. Rosemary Mariner was really the pioneer. She passed away of cancer too early, but she knocked on doors and rattled a lot of cages and worked in Congress to change those rules. And I actually worked for her at one time, and I can tell you, and George, you'll laugh about this, when she heard I was engaged, she called me to her office and she freaking reamed me upside down, left and right. Like, how dare you? There are women who count on you. You can't be a naval aviator and do everything you have to do and be married. And like, she goes, I want you to call that wedding off. And I'm like, well, since I got the
shit.
Well, you know what I mean, and then 13 years later, I ended up divorcing. So she might have been on to something, but anyway.
Yeah, but you got 3 awesome kids, so.
I know. So just shut my mouth. I know. But I'm just telling you, Rosemary, like, I think there was an I told you so in there somewhere. But anyway, she was, and those, like I said, those women, they endured a lot. I mean, and I'm not saying I didn't, but I think, the answer to people wanting you to fail was just dig in deeper, work harder, be, uber professional, don't let your guard down. I mean, I was never going to be part of it.
And I don't know if it's a quality because of growing up in York or if it's a quality of keeping similar families and family values and, growing up around each other. But like, I have that. If someone, the worst thing anyone has ever said to me is you can't do that because fuck you, motherfucker. I'm going to bury you and I'm going to do it and I'm going to celebrate when I do it.
Yeah.
And like, it's one thing that, my parents learned at a very early age with me is don't tell me I can't do it because I will do it and I'll try harder to do it. And I think that's the same way my father grew up. Mm-hmm. And
it's funny. Your grandfather, Pete, and my mom were very good friends, very close. Those two went back. They're both widow and widower, not like they weren't romantically involved, but they both had the utmost respect and admiration for each other. And I think that's one reason I'm so close to your dad and his, and his sisters is because, well, not only did we live through the woods, we could go and, So, it was those values. I agree with you. Don't tell me I can't do something because it just puts a fire in my belly, Yeah. And I think I think that's the problem. Everyone thinks they're entitled to something. You know, I didn't ask for anyone to hand me anything, but don't tell me I can't have the opportunity to try. George, I don't know if you remember this. I went out for punt, pass, and kick. I was like, I'm gonna do punt, pass, and kick. And I mean, I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean I can't? Because growing up with a twin brother, like, definitely did something to me too. I mean, like, well, how come he gets to do it and I don't? I wanted to do that. I was a tomboy. I wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Now, what was it like going through in the Navy into this program?
Training. You know, I was the first girl in the squadron. And the first squadron, so you go to jets, and I picked Kingsville, Texas. So there were 3 jet bases. And I picked Kingsville, Texas, and I picked it for this crazy reason because it was home of King Ranch in Kingsville, Texas. And King Ranch is some of the finest quarter horses ever bred. And I knew it was like 1,000 acres of ranch. And I thought, shoot, like when I'm not busy flying, I could go like ride their horses. Okay. Well, I mean, I was pretty busy. I didn't have a chance, but I did go to King Ranch and talk to them, and I did ride their horses and actually picked up a horse down there. Every duty station, I always picked up a horse to dabble with and stuff and train because, I mean, yeah, you work hard and stuff, but I also had a no date policy. I wasn't like going to date anybody because you're focused and you're studying. It's like a master's program or a doctorate program. I mean, you're always studying, getting ready for the next flight. And you could be on the schedule twice, or you could have a couple of days off, but you still had to know the systems inside and out. And I mean, it's high tempo, and the heat down in Texas, George lives it. I mean, I'm telling you, summer days on the tarmac, you know, you got a jet engine running, you got one in front of you blowing hot, you know, jet air on you. I mean, it was like 120 in the cockpit, and you were fully suited, gloves, oxygen mask, and helmet on, and there was no air conditioning. It was like, shoot, it was like roasting. So, yeah, it was physically and mentally very, you know, a lot of work and very draining. And it was a long syllabus. I mean, jet training was, because you went to 2 different types of aircraft. Now they have one. You know, they have the T-45, but back when I did, it was the T-2 and then the A-4, which is just an awesome little airplane. But yeah, and then, you know, you do formation, and now we're doing the full syllabus, and it all, you know, you end up going out the aircraft carrier and stuff. And, you know, a lot of times people think, okay, well, you're with an instructor. I got news for you. When you go to the aircraft carrier, you're solo. There's ain't no motherfucker that's going to get in that plane. So you do that. I mean, that's what the culmination. You get graded every landing at the airfield. It's graded, and you get downs. I mean, you get kicked. They'll kick you out in a heartbeat. Academically, you screw up 2 flights and you're done. Out.
I remember when you landed your first aircraft carrier landed.
Do you remember?
I do.
Yeah. You know, I remember because I remember driving to the base, and I had a 3 o'clock brief, 3 a.m. And I was just like going, God, I love my life, you know? I mean, and that's the beauty about the military. I mean, some people like regiment and stuff. I like knowing, I think it's probably because deep down, like before they were diagnosing ADD, I definitely think I am and was. But that's a gift because I'll tell you, flying is like multitasking. That's what it is. It's about being able to like prioritize, like, and being able to handle different things and not get, you know, thrown off by any single one of them. So, and that, you know, people, and so here's the other thing. So what kind of major, what do you think I majored in college to be a pilot? George, don't answer this. You might know.
George has no idea. No. Don't worry about that.
George, just put it this way. So who was between Josh and Sally, who's the smart one? That was Josh. My twin brother was a brainiac. He's a doctor. He's like, I was a poli-sci major. You know, people go like, oh, were you an aero major? I'm like, I don't have to build the damn airplane. I just have to fly it, you know? That's the truth, though. The point is, you don't have to be that technical major because I'm not testing the airplane. And you learn basic aerodynamics and stuff. But I would have struggled with that. I would never have made it. So poli-sci, I'm like, what, cocktail party conversation, jack of all trades, master of nothing. That's me, guys. That's me. Oh.
So you talk about multitasking and flying a plane. Before we started recording, we were talking about Dan Pedersen, the founder of Top Gun, one of the founders of Top Gun. He he told a story on that podcast where it was a night flight in Vietnam going back to a carrier, and he lost all his interior electronics and had to use a flashlight to see. And then the guy he was flying with ended up guiding him onto the carrier.
Yeah, so they train you with that. So yeah, that's like a GCA where he follows him, and then the deck will be lit up and he can follow them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about, talk about scary. And I'll put some hair on your chest.
Yeah.
So, well, my uncle died on a flying off
mission
over in Europe. And I just read the report last year. It just became unclassified. And in it was, the thing they looked at is he didn't have a flashlight. And he went through an electrical storm. And I think that may have been part of that, is not being able to recover, is he didn't have the flashlight. It wasn't on his checked in equipment. And when they did the analysis of it, that was part of the cause.
Oh my God. I mean, doesn't that just make you sick to your stomach? You're thinking, because you're right.
Something as simple as a flashlight could have saved.
Yeah. A $3 flashlight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we carry them. I mean, I fly commercial now, and we carry a flashlight. You never think about like those are things I carry it around for a pre-flight, but you're right. I mean, I've had smoke in the cockpit. They talk about the plane's on fire. How about smoke in the cockpit? I had smoke in the cockpit, and my eyes were burning. I couldn't see. It was electrical fire. And I'm like, what the hell? I can't blow the canopy because the seat goes too. Like, how do you get out of it? Yeah. So yeah. I mean, sometimes I tell you what, the technology is amazing in aviation now. I mean, amazing. In fact, when I moved to civilian, which was just recently, remember I took all those, I was out of the cockpit for 25 years. But I could not believe the redundancy of the systems. I mean, flying now is easy. The only thing that worries me is that the kids growing up and doing aviation and flying the glass cockpits and stuff, do they really know how to fly? And what happens if they lose? What happens if they have to go on their standby instruments? In the Navy, I used to be able to have to fly off my standby instruments. They'd put a hood on us in the back, and they'd bail all our instruments in the back, and you had to fly dead reckoning and stuff that they did in Vietnam. I mean, sans the flashlight. But it's and the kids these days, and I fly with them. I mean, great guys, and technologically they're good, and they're good gamers and everything, but they can't land. Those bad landings you get, that's them. They can't.
That's one of the things because I don't know if well, obviously Karen's son Conrad is a pilot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he did kind of he was given a lot of opportunities to fly as a young kid, and one of the youngest people in the country to ever have his pilot's license. I mean, I think he got it on his 14th birthday or whatever, 16th birthday, whenever he could. But at the same time, he went and flew banner planes in Virginia. He flew banner planes,
I think he did banner, didn't he? Did he do some crop dusting too, or did he do? Because down in Florida, there's all sorts of opportunities.
No, he did a lot of biplane, not biplane, but seaplanes down in flying out of Fort Lauderdale and all that. So I think and that's where I look at him, and I'm, out of everyone that I know that has ever flown a plane, he's one of the last people that I worry about, because I know he's had so much flight time on shithole airplanes.
Well, and you know what? He paid his dues. And he's learned. And a lot of these guys, though, they get their time, and they're so pre-COVID, so let's just date this. March 1st, there was a huge pilot shortage. Right now, June 1st, there's a huge pilot overage.
Right.
I mean, amazing how it's in fact, it's surreal to us. I took a video in Houston. I hit on March 31st. Over 2 days, I hit Newark, Chicago, Denver, Houston, plus all the little small airports in between. And I videotaped, and I was like, this is epic what's happening here, because they were starting to clear out. Things were, some stores were shut and stuff. And it was the beginning of the worst part of the pandemic, where flights were just getting canceled. Yeah. And I actually took leave of absence because I didn't want to have to be sitting at the airport with no way to get there. I didn't know what was going to happen because I was based out of New York and living in Virginia Beach. So, yeah, it was crazy. But he's the exception to that. A lot of these guys, they would come in with low hours. We're flying for the commercial because they were so short of pilots, and a lot of them were just CFIs, certified flight instructors. That's where they'd gotten their times instructing other people. They had no jet time, no experience, and a lot of them like just flying with sometimes. Well, because remember I was in the right seat. I'm in the right seat, so I'm not flying with a lot of greenies. But just because I knew a lot of greenies, they were like the captains I flew with would tell me about how like scared they were about turbulence and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, they've like, I've been like struck by lightning and stuff. People have no idea. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting. Now you can be sure that the people who come back to flying are going to be, hopefully they're going to be with the hours.
A guy I know is a pilot for JetBlue, and he sent me a text message. He was on a flight, and he sent me a text message of like the sunrise, and I noticed in the picture that his co-pilot was scrolling Facebook on his phone. I was like, that does not give me a warm, fuzzy feeling whatsoever about my airline pilots. He goes, that thing.
He is for the landing and takeoff.
Yeah, that's what he said. He's like, we're only there to get.
They want you to be on autopilot. I didn't even grow, like I flew the A4. We didn't have autopilot. Like, what are you talking about? We could trim the plane up and it could fly itself, but autopilot, in fact, yeah, well, anyway, listen, in fact, autopilot's mandatory above 18,000 feet.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, they want us to be on autopilot. And when the weather's really bad, you're on autopilot as low as 100 feet, and then you take the plane if you see the runway. Otherwise, they trust the system more. I tend to be, from my roots in the military, I'm like, okay, I know more than this airplane does. And I've learned to like trust the system and stuff, but everyone else, like 400 feet autopilot, I'll always hand fly the plane to like 15 or 16,000 feet, and then I'll call for the autopilot. But I like to hand fly it. I like to know I can fly the plane. And I really like crosswind landings. I mean, I always like it to be challenging.
Well, it's what keeps you interested, right? I mean,
I think so. I think that's it. Yeah, I think so.
And that's where, anybody, I think, wants a challenge. I mean, I would say you took on the biggest challenge of, breaking barriers and then, getting into flying in the Navy as you did. And then now you've taken on this whole, we'll kind of transition a little bit, but like Island Dog Rescue, that's huge.
That's another, yeah.
I mean, because you weren't busy enough with the farm that you have in Virginia Beach and your 3 kids and your husband. Now we need one more thing on our plate.
Just piling on. Yeah, that's
polo
me.
ponies, right? Yeah, there's other.
Yeah.
Polo pony. Oh, yeah. There's more things.
So the dog rescue came so segueing. So my mom remarries when I'm 8 and the guy she married has a house in the Caribbean. So I moved in 3rd grade, I moved to the Caribbean. Well, my mom, because she wanted to, these are her words. She said, I want you to have hair on your chest. Okay. Like, hello. And she goes, and the only way to do that is to do what your older siblings did, and that's to move around a lot, like change schools. So I went to, some of them were still in York. Between, York Beach and stuff, but I went to 13 different schools in
Jesus.
Yeah. And then I think that's why I did 6 colleges, because like, who does that,
I couldn't imagine doing 1 high school, let alone 6 colleges.
Oh my God. So yeah, so I went to 3 high schools, and but yeah, I grew up with my mom in the bush, rescuing dogs from the Caribbean. So I grew up dog rescuing, all animal rescuing, horses, donkeys. The only thing I didn't do was cats. Nothing personal against cats, but I didn't rescue.
No, it's okay. We're an anti-cat podcast.
I got no problem with that.
Except tigers. Like big cats are cool.
Oh, wait a second. Okay, my son made me watch that tiger.
Thank you. The
Oh my God.
stupidest bullshit I've ever seen.
That was a waste of what, about 5 hours of mine. He's been, it's addictive. He's like had me binge watch. I go, here, I cannot, like, people can't be real. Like, I don't have time for this drama. And it saddens me to think that people like this really exist. And even more importantly, people like that go to those things. So anyway, yeah.
I know of not. I only know that there was some show I've never heard or seen.
Oh,
Maybe
you got to
watched
watch it.
Waste of time. No,
You don't have the attention span.
Oh, excuse me.
No, it keeps you. I mean, it's entertaining.
well,
And I mean, now it just came out that Carol Baskin got Joe Exotic Zoo now. She owns it.
What?
Yeah. Just came out this week.
See, that's the problem with this COVID-19. It makes me excited to hear that Carol Baskin owns a fucking zoo in Oklahoma or whatever it is. Why does that shit? 6 months ago, that shit didn't even matter to me, and now I'm like, what about all the baby tigers?
I know. Those little cubby bears. I know. I don't know.
That was the worst part about it. You see, just breeding those tigers constantly.
I know. How sad.
So they could make money off of the cubs, and then they just end up with all these big tigers that are eating,
So
expired sausages.
Yeah, or the local dog or horse.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, and that's really the problem. The lack of, animals follow their instincts, and we set them up, and we've domesticated dogs and stuff. And so my feeling is about the overpopulation problem with unwanted, whether it's horses, dogs, cats, is that we deserve better than that, and we owe them spay neuter. We owe people access to spay neuter clinics. I think they should be free by the county, because that's a lot cheaper than having all the animal control and managing unwanted animal populations. And so the dog rescue thing started, and it just went, well, for lack of viral, literally and figuratively. My little rescue, island dog rescue, went viral after Hurricane Irma and then Maria, because that's when I chartered that big jet and brought them 400 plus animals to my farm.
Holy cow.
And that's just awesome. I mean, and I've never, I mean,
They didn't stay there. Just to be clear, they didn't stay there. They were gone, and now rescues came and got them, but I evacuated.
Bill said?
yeah.
Bill didn't even know. He did not even know. He came back from London the night of, and I said, I got to get up at 1 o'clock. He goes, what's going on? I go, there's a plane coming. He saw, how my son was in Afghanistan, and he read it on the Drudge Report. He's like saw this, and he clicked on the link. It was Virginia Pilot. He goes, sounds like something my mother would do. And he goes, oh my God, that is my mother.
400. So is it just 400?
Straight
But you
dogs.
know what? No, not off the street. So Irma had come and decimated the shelter in St. Thomas. So their dogs were in crates, like literally in crates. They had no vet. It was a mess and very little calm. And honestly, from my 20 plus years in the military, I was home for 2 weeks getting friggin' eyeglasses. Can you believe it? Like, in fact, like they did a prescription and you have to wait for them, and then you try them. And to this day, those eyeglasses don't even work. I swear to God, I felt like it was my mother tapping somebody on the shoulder and go, excuse me, my daughter can't fly for 2 weeks. She's got to come home for a reason, figure out what it is so she can be around. Because if I was in training at that time, when you're in simulators and you're like training in the airlines, you don't know what day of the week it is. Your sim might be at 1 a.m. All you're doing is, George, it might be like bridge training for your guys. That's all you're doing. You're focusing on that. You have no idea. You live, eat, and sleep like studying and simulators. That's it. So, so I just happened to be home, and I'm like, Irma hit. So in my office, I have a glass wall, half wall, and it was like a command and control center. And I had all this stuff up, and I was like, who can help me? And because I'm on the board of directors, and because I have connections with, it's a small government, so it's not because I know people, but, I knew who the senators were and the representatives. And so, they'd use sat phones and stuff. There was no comms. Well, I could talk to St. Croix. Well, I'm watching off of Africa. So was CNN. I was watching off of Africa, this like system forming, which would become tropical depression became Hurricane Maria. And I was watching it come across, and I'm like, God, that could be like going to the Caribbean and St. Croix. And sure enough, in 79, I wasn't in St. Croix, but we totally lost our home, as did most of the island, to Hurricane Hugo. So I knew what a Cat 5 hurricane could do. And Hurricane Maria was coming. So I was on the phone with a company called Amerijet in Miami, Florida, and I was getting supplies. I was sending down every 2 days. I would pay people's tickets down there. It was like $50 to go down there. And I got people, I was sending generators down there. We were sending insulin for people and for animals, and we were taking care of everybody. And I would send people down there, and I say, you know, you pay for your way back. They couldn't fly into St. Thomas. They would go into Puerto Rico. They were running boats across. It was kind of like a drug deal. Like, you know, I'd give people cash and stuff, and I said, get these supplies to St. Thomas. You have to give me at least 5 days down there helping them. So that's what they did. So I had all these people going down. So we probably sent, I forget what the final count was, but every other day I was sending between 700 and 1,000 pounds down on the airlines. And this is before I worked for them. So United American, I mean, they were wonderful. They were letting me send everything. It was all in the name of humanitarian services. Anyway, so I'm watching Maria come, and I'm like, so I'm talking to Amerijet, and I'm like, okay, we're going to charter a plane. And the people down on the islands are like, oh yeah, well, the National Guard will do it. They said they would. I talked to a pilot, and I'm like, okay, I was in the military. No, it doesn't matter what I want to carry unless it's Christmas presents or something. I can't like load up a plane full of animals and land someplace. So I went ahead and talked to Amerijet and said, hey, I want to be ready to go with a private plane. So we were going to use a 767. We had to end up using a 737 because the airport couldn't handle they couldn't do anything with they couldn't load because everything was destroyed in St. Thomas. So the plane was going to go to St. Thomas. I said, I want to go to St. Croix and get their animals. If I'm going to pay $87,000, then we got to get St. Croix. So anyway, I didn't pay 87. I'll explain that in a second. So the total bill was $112,000, and I raised it in 24 hours. And
yeah,
I did that because first of all, it was in the news. Second of all, an organization that wishes to remain anonymous said, hey, we'll give you $50,000 in matching funds if you can raise 50. So
that's like, amazing.
Yeah. And then I was getting checks for $10,000. I mean, that was a 501c3, so they weren't coming to me. But we got $112,000, and I got a call at 1 a.m, and Janice called me and said, hey, I'm looking at the weather. And I was like sleeping 3 or 4 hours. Remember, I'm home alone, right, with my dogs and waiting for my reading glasses. And so I said, yeah, I'm looking at the same thing. She goes, we have to move this up 24 hours. And I go, I agree. So, and I knew fuel constraints. I knew they only had so much time on the ground between going to St. Thomas and St. Croix, where they weren't going to refuel because St. Croix was getting ready for the hurricane. So they went to St. Thomas, went to St. Croix, got their animals, took a little longer, and then flew and arrived here at 1 a.m. So a couple of things. When they got to, so we raised the money 36 hours after they left St. Croix, the shelter where we took 65 animals, dogs, cats. This is dogs and cats. So you can't be anti-cat here. 36 hours later, the shelter was gone, just sticks, just piles of sticks. So all those animals would have been dead. So the plane landed. At first, we're like, oh, go to Newark and stuff. And I'm like, how about Norfolk? Because here's what I know. You go to tarmac and, the logistics and groups. I'm going, I have a farm 20 minutes from the airport. And so I took the stalls and I made them into where we organized them so we could stack kennels. We had places to walk. I had plenty of, real estate to walk. We had over, it's a little bit of a fog to me because I hadn't slept or anything. But when I left here at 12:30 at night to go and meet, to go into the airport. The police met me there. And I had I'd already hired, well, she ended up donating her time, a vet clinic and all their techs. I didn't have to, but I said, hey, these animals have been in an arduous situation. I need somebody to do a check on them. So they were going to be checked and cleared. So we had triage set up. We had a car that was dedicated to going to emergency if we had to get a dog there. when I got there, the police were there, and I'm like, and I'd gone to the city because I used to consult for them, and so I knew everybody. I thought, like, what the hell did I forget? That they're going to shut me down. The police said, we're going to have to give you an escort. There are 160 cars lined up to help you move those animals to your farm.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So here it is. It's 1 a.m. So like it had gotten out. I mean, this is like where like a media should have been there, but they weren't. And so we got in there, and people would take animals, and they would go, and they went to the farm, and we cleared the field next to me for people to park. And we were just, and we had rented big lights and floodlights and stuff. And at 7, I mean, I was exhausted. I was up all night, and like media was there in the morning. I let the vet do this. I was just numb. I let the vet do the talking there, but rescue organizations that were coming to meet were already there arriving. In 4 days, all the animals were gone. I mean, that first day, over 400 arrived. I mean, over 200 left the first day. The next day, vans came. So all the animals like went to like pre-planned rescue partners. You know, it wasn't just haphazard.
Yeah.
But understand, I took dogs and animals that I knew nothing about. Like some of them had been seizure cases from DEA and stuff. Like, so you don't know, and you're like, you know, so we had set up all this stuff. We had releases, we had rules, we had, you know, armbands, we had people designated, we had people that were handling the cats. And I had an apartment there. They set up a cat or whatever they do for cats. Anyway, it was freaking, it was amazing. Of those dogs, only one expired, and he didn't expire. She was extremely heartworm positive. She was in congestive heart failure. She was triaged, and she went right to the ER, and they called me, and I just said, hey, make her comfortable, let her, you know, they said, look, she's not going to make it, not going to be. So she lived for 2 days and knew love and stuff for 2 days, and then we let her go. And then another dog I had to put down because he was part of the DEA seizure and was just unpredictable. Like, we didn't know what the trigger was, and we just go after a dog, and, you know, again, made the decision, but not till we got him to a nice, safe, quiet place, let him have, but it wasn't adoptable, just the liability was too great. But those were the only 2 dogs we lost in that. And then, so that was the Virgin Islands, and I've been moving dogs from St. Croix, you know, all along. I've helped St. Thomas, and I swore to God I would never go into Puerto Rico, and like I'm up to my fucking elbows in Puerto Rico right now, and it's a mess. It's a mess because you can't, like, I don't know how you, like, we're all about, like, we're rescue, rehabilitate, rehome, resolve. And, you know, the resolve parts, like, I'm not one of those people that likes to just kind of like keep like addressing, you know, the outside of the problem. I'm like, what's the root of the problem? Like, how do we fix it?
Get down to the root cause and stop it. I mean,
yeah, so that you don't have, so you're not repeating the mistakes that we keep making. So in St. Croix, if you can get your arms around that, and so we struggle, and I'm on the board, and, you know, we have humane education, community outreach, low cost, no cost, spay neuter. And the big thing, and, you know, so here's the argument. I'm going to give you this. So for anybody out there who might be going, well, what about, you know, dogs in the U.S.? Well, first of all, these are U.S. dogs because those are U.S. territories. Secondly, my other argument is animals don't choose their citizenship. It's where they happen to be. And third, I'll go wherever there's need. And I don't care if it's China, whatever. Like, I mean, that's not what I do, but I don't like, I don't judge those people that go to China and get the meat trade dogs or whatever, you know, like, as long as everyone's heart's in the right place. But whatever we do, let's always get and start addressing what the root problem is. And in the Caribbean, it's cultural, it's resources, it's selfishness. And, you know, at the rate that animals can, you know, reproduce and stuff, it's very difficult to control. So I will have to say that it was bad after Hurricane Maria. In fact, Nation Swell did a really cool video with some clips I did about the causes. And then you had the earthquakes. But I will tell you, in the last 45 days, I've moved 700 animals.
Holy cow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, some of them are up in your neck of the woods.
I heard some of them coming up this way.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be honest, I mean, I grew up, obviously, you know, my parents raised and bred labs.
I love them. Yeah, I love it. I don't have a problem with that. But I'd like to
I pissed off my parents so bad this fall.
Did you adopt a dog? Do you rescue a dog?
I did.
Good for you. Where from?
Actually, it was very local, and it was one of those cases where I've kind of mentioned it on here before, but Huey unfortunately lost his lab this past August, September.
Yeah, last
August. And it was a dog I had hunted over. Putting down a dog is fucking the worst thing in the world.
It's like, it goes right up there. They talk like losing, it's a family member. Like,
it really is. And,
if you're worth a shit, it's like losing a family member. If you don't care, then something's wrong with you.
I was alone.
I would have rather died.
Yeah. I was out working. I was down in Connecticut. I was not around anybody to like hang out with or talk about, and I wasn't there, to be there for Huey. And it hit me super, super, super hard. And I remember sitting in my hotel room just being like, this is not fair. Like it sucks. Like it was cancer with his dog, and it was one of those things where it was like, it was better that the decision that was made.
Right.
I don't fault any decision that was made, but it was still like,
it still sucks.
And that dog brought back so many ducks to me and all this. And I had always wanted, I'm actually looking at a picture right now. You can't see it because it's behind you, but it's a picture of a Chessie that we used to have. And for the life of me, I couldn't tell you how long we actually had that dog. I think it was under a year, maybe a year and a half, but we had to rehome it because it was a Chessie and we had another male dog in the house that they just fought, and they were trying to establish dominance. And I get that, but I've always loved the Chessie. I'm, huge into waterfowling. That's all I want to do. That's all I care about.
Well, and your mom
besides
and dad,
my family.
I will tell you, like, people think people who rescue like me are anti-breeders, and I'm not. In fact, I totally support and people, the quality small breeders like George and Kathy. They raise quality dogs. They take care of them. You can know who the parents are. My issues are with the puppy mills. People are so uneducated. They don't understand where they come from, mostly the Amish or backyard breeders, and who don't care about quality. We have one of my volunteers has right now one of 8 boxer puppies that they have to bottle feed because 8 of them from different litters have cleft palate. And honestly, those breeders would just kill the dogs, and that might, I mean, without rescues, but I resent, like, the last thing a rescuer wants to be is a rescuer. I want to be out of business. I would love to find a way to not do this. But the argument people will give me is, we have dogs in the U.S. And my question is, well, what the fuck are we doing 20 years later, still rescuing dogs from the South? Like, why isn't the legislation in place that goes after these people that don't take care of their animals? And the thing is, there are laws that can mitigate a lot of this. And the same with Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, and nobody's willing to do it. It's like, that we can regulate cars and how people drive and, licenses and stuff. Why can't we do that with animals? It wouldn't have all this pain and suffering.
Well, and that's where, like, when I started, as soon as Huey had to put down his dog, I started looking again, because, I mean, the fact of the matter is my lab is 10. He'll be 10 this November. He's getting up there. We're not going to be able to hunt him. Now, did I know that my parents already had impregnated a dog?
Because he wanted a dog, yeah.
Not necessarily for me specifically.
Yeah.
You kept a dog out of it too. So
yeah, but I wasn't intending.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, you weren't.
It sounds like Huey, you and I need to duck, man.
Yeah.
I've learned over the years, the 10, 15 years I've known these guys, is I just.
Yeah.
Can I go, like, can I recharge my rum and Coke here?
Yeah. But, it's one of those things where it was like, all right, I think now, and looking at my situation, and I still think I made the right decision, and I think my parents at this point are on board with knowing that that I made the right decision with.
Senna's awesome.
A puppy in my house would not have been good with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Especially trying to train it for
Trying to
waterfowl.
trying to put in the time to train it, trying to put in the time to just get basic obedience and not chew up everything in the goddamn house everywhere.
And you were gone.
And I was, and so I came home. I found a lady that was rehoming a dog. And fact of the matter, she should have never owned the fucking dog to begin with. The dog had been in 3 fights with her other dog. The woman had gotten bit in the middle of the last fight, so she was like, all right, that's the last straw.
Well, and if that's reported, that's a hit against the dog, unfortunately. So,
but this lady is 70 plus years old, retired teacher, maybe 110 pounds soaking wet. This fucking Chessie in my house is 88 fucking pounds.
She's a horse.
It's a goddamn horse.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so we went and met it, and the dog seemed great. She had staples in her leg. We took her to the vet, got her checked out. She was all fine. And then I left. I left my wife with a question mark. My wife is a fucking saint, and I will be the first person to admit this.
I think both of our wives are.
Yeah. I think all 3 of our wives.
Yeah.
And it went, it was my first experience ever rehoming a dog, not of a dog that I did not know, but also kind of the adoption process and getting used to a new dog in the house. And still, it's sort of, there are times where it's questionable still in the house. I mean, if I tickle, this dog is incredible. If I try and mess with any of my kids, if I try and tickle them, if we're just horsing around, that dog is in my face barking and trying to get between me and the girls.
She doesn't see it as play. Yeah.
And she hates my father.
Only when I walk in the door.
Hates him. She goes.
Well, it sounds like she's definitely more inclined towards women anyway, but
she loves me.
Well, she loves Huey. She loves me, but she does not like. She has recognized, and she is my daughter's dog. My oldest daughter, Olivia. She is her dog. It does not matter, and it's awesome. I love it, and it's
Well, that must be reassuring. I mean, that first date. Can you imagine that dog? That first date was going to happen for a long time.
There's enough guns in this house. It's not going to happen for a real long time. Hopefully, we're still under COVID and we're all locked down, and she can't date until she's 26.
So my first dog that Garrett mentioned, Riley, Yellow Lab. I got him. It
fell in your lap.
It fell in my lap. I rescued him. I adopted him. He was just under a year old when I got him, and it was an ad, a classified ad, basically. And the family had 2 small dogs, and they were moving into a smaller house, and unfortunately, they had to give Riley up. So I jumped on him. I went and met him, took him home. I mean, his AKC paperwork hadn't even been registered yet. So the first place I brought him was to George and Kathy's house. And
Kathy's. Let's clarify that right now. I had brains of them.
And
Nothing's changed, huh?
and she met him, and he was a puppy, a year-old puppy, and the first 2 weeks were hell, and I regretted every day. And then after that, Kathy started working with him, and she said, I remember her saying to me, he is somewhere in his bloodline. There is hunting. There's something, because he just picked it up, and we hunted 4, 5, 6 years with him, and he was going out when I wasn't going hunting. He would go out with George and Garrett, and unfortunately, last August, or it's the end of July, we noticed him starting to limp, and just figured it was age. And then my wife had him, and he went to get in the back of her car, and he fell over backwards. and then he couldn't walk at all. So he had a tumor crushing his femur essentially, and
So was it bone cancer or a different kind?
it was hematoma something or other cancer, and it was 3 days from
Really?
when we brought him to the vets to when we made the decision.
Well,
And ultimately the vet told me, he said we could take his leg and he can maybe live 6 months. We could take his leg and do chemotherapy and he can live 6 months, or you can just
let him
your
go on.
decision.
Let him go without having to go through all that relearning.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was it. And it was crushing.
Well, no preparation for it. No, I know. I mean, and every time I even tell him now, like, look at I have 4, and I have 1 purebred, and it's a yellow lab.
That's what he was
for the marriage. Yeah. So, I tell him, someday I know you guys will be gone, but I just going to remind you and myself how much I appreciate you now, and for all the pain that I'm going to go through. I wouldn't trade what I have right now,
That's exactly it.
I'll never do this again. And I'm like, but would you give up all that love and all that caring and all those events and hunting trips? And
that dog, I pulled in, my parents were renting a lake house, and I drove down the dirt road, and he was sitting in the front seat of my truck, and I had the windows down, and he saw the water, and he jumped out of the truck and headed for the lake. So I parked the truck, I got out, and I wasn't walking, but I was moving at a trot to get down to the water because I didn't know whose yard he had gone through. And all of a sudden I hear a loon screeching, and he had jumped up onto a man-made loon's nest that the state had put in the lake. And I saw feathers, and then I saw the loon take off. I'm like, all right, so I don't think he killed anything, but that dog, just stories like that were rampant with him.
That's something. Well, I guess you like Kathy said, there's something in his bloodlines that made him.
He was, yeah.
I will say again, I've always appreciated, like good breeders of stock that take care of their animals and their training and know where they're going. I've never had a problem with that. It's my issues, the puppy mills, or just irresponsible ownership.
Well,
and
speak of the devil.
Letting their animals run and not spay neuter.
Here she is.
And you'll never make money at it. So
Yeah, the horse made an appearance.
Yeah.
Can't really see
Oh,
her.
the horse is there.
Uh-oh.
Oh my gosh, look at her.
And she's gone. But so as far as how long have you been doing Island Dog Rescue since those?
I've been doing it like informally. I mean, I'd have to say the 90s. I mean, I moved dogs. I mean, at 20 some years in the military, I didn't. But right now I'm looking at a picture that was painted by an artist, and it's a building in St. Croix with like 12 dogs, some of the ones my mom rescued and it came through our house and stuff. So I grew up with it, but Island Dog Rescue has been like going with a vengeance. I mean, my average is 200 to 300 dogs per month.
Holy cow.
And believe it or not, there's actually a dog shortage up in the Northeast in Canada.
Well, don't tell my wife that.
Yeah, so that's where I move them. So to be clear, I don't leave them in Florida. I fly them to every other week. I mean, it's hard to get a reservation. In fact, you're going to die. I just sent a request to Amerijet asking if I could charter a 767. I know that's crazy, but there's such, with hurricane season coming, the heat coming, and with flights no longer flying dogs live cargo, there is such a demand. So I'm like, let me just charter a plane and we'll put 600 or 700 animals on it and get some relief for these rescues. And I'm telling you, that sounds like a lot of animals, but spread out, like shelters taking 20 here and there. And adopted. And these are highly adoptable animals. I mean, our Facebook, I do these stories. I need to do more. And I've done. Hey, you. Hey, do you want a pony?
Yes.
She doesn't have headphones on, but I believe Grumpy and Grammy would gladly take a pony.
I'll bring you a pony.
Tommy.
Yeah, a pony. A pretty
want a pony?
pony.
Yeah.
Mini donks.
Yeah, let me look at. I mean, I don't. People don't know this, but we slaughter in this country. Well, okay, so technically we don't slaughter horses because we don't. We are better than that. But what we do is now we send them to Canada and Mexico to a horrific death where they are no longer protected under any of our rules and or have any of our safeguards, and they ship live, and a lot of them die. A lot of them mare's birth. 20,000 plus horses a month.
Oh, die in Canada and Mexico?
From the U.S. Go look up kill pen. Just go on Facebook and look at kill pen horses, and you will see mares and foals. You'll see pregnant mares. They're not supposed to send them. They do it. And you know what? All the people, I don't think camp's going to be a big thing, but at the end of the summer, all those little camp horses your kids fall in love with, guess where they go?
Holy fuck.
Yeah, people just don't, and the thing is, like, rescuing horses, like, yeah, you do it. I've, rescued hundreds over 20 years, but it's not like a dog, not everyone can have a horse and can sponsor that. And there's a lot of care and there's vet bills and it's a whole different.
I was talking to a guy I know from York. His daughter does barrel racing.
Yeah.
And he travels all around the country with her doing that. And they were in Kentucky, and they happened to stop at a friend's house. And there was 2 rescue horses that they had in a round pen that were exiled race horses, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I have at my farm.
And
OTTBs, off the track thoroughbreds. Yeah.
And he said he walked up and he put his arm on the round pen, and one came over and set his head right on his arm.
Yeah.
And he looked at his friend and said, "Put this one in the trailer. He's coming home with me."
Ah, cool. I just picked up a pony actually earlier today. Picked up a pony it's in Oklahoma, but it was a kill pen pony, and so she'll be here in a week or so.
Wow.
I have the farm. I have the land.
Yeah, if you got the land and the resources.
Listen, and I have the time. I mean, I'm not flying. I've got time. So.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome.
And you've got a husband that just really is really understanding.
I might have he just doesn't know. I don't live at the farm. He has Garrett. He has no idea, and he has a boat. You keep him. Listen, 2 things can keep him happy: sailing and sex, and sailing. And sex, not necessarily in that order,
Well, I'm glad you just told us you went sailing, so we'll keep the other part on the other side.
Yeah. So anyway, he doesn't know.
So I've got a question.
Okay.
And did you have a call sign in the Navy?
I did.
What was your call sign?
Beach.
Beach?
Well, I think it was a variant of bitch, but beach.
Okay. All right. So this may answer my second question. Do you get to pick your call sign, or does somebody else pick it for you?
No, somebody else picks it for me. But I tell you what, I barely escaped being called Pinky because I was sitting, remember that hot tarmac in Kingsville, Texas?
Yeah.
I was waiting to get clearance onto the runway. And I knew there were planes in the pattern, and I had the canopy up, and they said, you're cleared for an immediate takeoff. I'm like, okay, and I took it because you're burning fuel, and so the more fuel you burn, the less time you get flying. So I turned, and everything's with a stick, it's not with a yoke. So I turned to look, I put the canopy down, and I had my hand on the rail, but not over there. Wasn't resting my hand, but enough where my pinky got caught and crushed in the canopy. And so now I'm on the runway, and I lifted it right away, and I'm going down the runway and acceleration with the jets pretty fast. And I'm passing 80 knots, and I'm like, I like all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, my glove's completely bloodied. I thought maybe I'd severed my finger. So I like aborted. I called for the abort, pulled off at the end. And they said, we'll have some of the fire trucks and stuff. And I didn't like, I'm like, shit, what do I tell them? Anyway, the people, the fire trucks, they couldn't even wake them up. Those guys were sound asleep. They had to taxi the plane back in. Not that they could have done anything for me. I guess they would have taken me by ambulance. So anyway, I taxied in there. I got out of the plane. I didn't want to take off my glove because it was like soaked in blood. And they took me to the hospital right there, the small clinic, and they took my glove off there. Fortunately, it was just crushed. But I avoided, thank God, the call sign Pinky. I'm like, dear God, don't let them change my call sign. Don't let them. So yeah, I will take beach any day. So anyway.
Well, that's what I smashed the shit out of my pinky with my father's sister.
Wait, which one?
Karen.
It had to be Karen, not Phila. Yeah, it had to be Karen. Yeah.
Well,
probably intentional.
No, it was all on me. She took me sledding, and I took a metal runner sled off of a jump and landed on ice. And in the midst of the jump, my hand made it to the bottom of the sled and smashed my pinky. And I didn't want to tell anybody.
It doesn't hurt for like 30 seconds, and then it all comes like the blood and all the feeling, the nerves. There's a lot of nerves in that little pinky.
Yeah.
There were. Yeah.
Yeah, there were.
Yeah, I don't have one either. I got mine smashed at sea. The guy.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I smashed it and it split right away. Just crushed. It was about a 200-pound electric motor landed on it.
So, can you do this with your hand that got crushed?
Do what? No, I can't. Can't do that anyway. It means I got to be no.
So this is something that my wife, like, pinky down, all other fingers up.
I can't do that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this.
I can't do that. Am I supposed to be able to?
Well, so the other thing, like, so I can do it with one hand.
Huey, can you curl your tongue? That's like genetic. Can you curl your tongue? Yeah.
I can do that.
I can roll my tongue.
I can only close one eye. Can't close my left eye.
Oh, really?
I can't. My right eye. Yeah, can't close my
We've
right
gone straight off the rails.
Yeah. But like this one, like even I can get this, but I cannot bend my pinky straight. Like
Right.
that pinky will not go.
Oh wow.
Like
Blame Karen.
Now I'm infatuated with the fact I can't. Maybe my call sign should be Pinky.
We'll get you the patch, Huey. We'll get you the patch.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that, I mean, kind of circling back to the military career, it's been awesome to see also that you've passed it on to your, well, I don't know if you feel it's awesome, but I think it's awesome that you've passed it on to your sons.
So check this out. So I'm married to a SEAL. His son leaves Saturday he's just finished pre-BUD, so he's headed to BUD. So he's in SEAL training.
Who is?
And
Bill's son.
And then my oldest is an intel officer and done 3 combat deployments. And then middle one's flying helicopters, the Romeos.
Jesus.
Age 60 Romeos. And he's on a night flight right now doing TAC form or something. He's finishing up at what they call the RAG, the FRS. But he's got a squadron down there in Florida. And then and that leaves Niall, the youngest one, who's good with a good shooter, FBI or something, but he's not eligible for the military for a genetic, it's very easy to be disqualified from the military. But yeah, 3 of 4 in the military, so not bad.
So you're a force multiplier yourself.
Yeah. Listen, I'm telling you, George can tell you, man, like I would like kick my kids. I was a single mom for years and stuff. I ruled with an iron. I think I got my
Iron
mom.
Fist.
Yeah, I did. Tell you what, man, I would like kick him out of the car and leave him on the side of the road on a highway, which I know I shouldn't say that because Child Protective Service. I mean, CPS could have
In my childhood was my wife says I was a free range child, which it makes more sense where my parents were awesome they were great, but they worked a lot. So I would go off and do stupid shit. And, you know, there's stuff to this day that my mother doesn't know I did. And,
I think we all can say that. Huh?
yeah.
Yep.
So it's just, we all grow up.
My parents try to say that they know everything, but I know they don't
No,
because
no.
I know we haven't had the conversations that they would know some of the stuff that they don't know. But now now they have grandkids, so they can't kill me now.
Yeah, it's too late. That's right. They gotta-
Yeah.
All right.
So it's about time. I mean, a couple nice little family dinners, just stories start coming.
Yeah.
Well, I always refer to ourselves as feral children when I was a kid growing up. 'cause-
Well, you know, it's
Yeah.
not the truth, George, but what a great childhood. I mean, the lack of television, we would our imaginations were
oh yeah.
as wild as we were. I mean, we
But-
just,
My wife, her father is a 20-year retired Marine and spent a good portion of his career in the drill field as a drill instructor at Paris Island. So she
like a mean bed, huh?
yeah, she grew up in a very structured lifestyle, which is great. She's an incredible human being just for the fact that she
She's
puts up
awesome.
with me.
Yeah.
And so I was telling her a story of the fact both my parents were at work. I was home alone. I was like 10 or 11, and I got on my bike in Elliott, Maine, and rode to downtown Portsmouth by myself. And she was absolutely floored at the fact that I did it, and my parents never even knew about it. And I'm pretty sure my mom still doesn't know about it. But and I won't tell her until I have grandkids, or she listens to this podcast.
Yeah.
Too.
When you're only true confessions.
I don't know how you can say your mother was so tough. She was the sweetest lady going.
I was going to say, because I grew up, I remember spending time at your mom's, and not even with my parents, but because.
Yeah, you'd hang out with her. Yeah.
Well, but it was because her neighbor was the Hardings.
Yeah.
And so I was always at Charlie Harding and I, which he's doing awesome for himself. I mean, they've got, talk about podcast, jealousy, but his podcast is picked up and they're doing awesome stuff with, song stuff. And he's doing.
Jr. This is Charlie, obviously Charlie Jr.
Yes. So he worked for Google for a long time, and then he went to work. Now he's doing a podcast. It's called What's on Pop, and it's basically they dissect modern day songs and take them on and look at them from a standpoint of it doesn't matter if you look at a Beethoven versus a Miley Cyrus song. There are similarities, and there's reasons why those songs are catchy, and it's really cool. They switched on pop. I'm sorry. Yeah. But growing up next door and always seeing, your mom around, I loved going to that house. It was just something I loved. It was such a warm, inviting. Your mom was phenomenal.
Yep. And I miss her dearly. But I would tell you, even when I was going up to visit her, it'd be like a sweat X for me. I'm like, okay, what? Just because I was her daughter, she was she was tough on us, but it was good tough. I mean, I think.
Well, right, but it's, and I feel it from whether my parents know it or not. And it's part of the reason why I am the way I am, which rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but it's, I have expectations for myself that are so high because of the expectations that I know my parents have, whether they want to tell me them or not. I mean, flat out, I got kicked out of college my senior year.
Well, I got kicked out of college too.
Do you think my parents were super impressed that I got kicked out of my father's alma mater? No.
You think my mother knew?
My father knew.
My mother only knew in the last couple of years of her life. Did she know?
Oh, Jesus Christ. But it was,
we couldn't do all that stuff. So,
But it was similar where it's like, I'm not going to let this define me, and I'm going to be able to make it on my own. And
yeah, exactly. You know what? There are lots of mistakes. I mean, that's the thing. People feel like they have to be perfect, and they don't know how broken my path was, and all the insecurities and all the struggles I had. I mean, shoot, what I did find, and what I told my son, Rye went through the same thing. I wasn't sure which way Rye would land. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised when he, made the path to go to the military, but that wasn't how it was for him. And he scared me because he reminded me of myself. But I found, though, how like bad luck sometimes begets bad luck and things go downhill, but it's the same thing with positive stuff. When you do positive stuff in your life, it can feed and it can snowball uphill. It can become good. And I just found the more successes I had and the more headway I made, that it led to more successes, and it made me feel good. And I celebrated those. So I always tell people, look, that's why I believe, like, just do something good every day and let your day build on that. Keep doing good acts and doing good things and making small successes. So if I was to leave anyone with anything, it would be, every day strive to do something good and then do something else good. Keep just doing little things. Okay.
1,000%. I mean,
truer word.
Yeah. And I think, with the turmoil that's going on in this country, I think that's exactly the message that's got to be sent, right? I mean, it's not going to change overnight, but if you can open that door, if you can do that nicer thing for someone else.
Be nice to somebody. Do something
Yeah.
nice. Take care of somebody else. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't slap somebody today.
Well, I mean, hey, good.
Yeah, that's a good start, right? I work in retail, Sally, so
Oh my God.
with everything that's going on, I've been ready to slap a mother effer since
I
March
do have
15th.
one still question for you, though.
What do you got?
How come TJ Maxx isn't considered essential? Because it sure is to me.
So I don't work in that type of retail.
Yeah.
I sell like lawn equipment and stuff like that. So I'm in sales and parts and stuff like that. So we were deemed essential due to agriculture.
Okay, good.
And
horse feed.
Yeah, and we sell horse grade and dog food and stuff like that.
Fucking chickens.
Yeah. So I work at an agway. And
yeah, well, I'm a Tractor Supply girl. We don't have agway. Hey, Bill's here. I want you to see his hair. Come here, Bill. Come, let him see your hair. Bill, he's so deaf. He can't hear. That's the other reason. He doesn't know what I do because he can't hear shit.
George is deaf too. Don't worry.
It's George, Garrett, and Huey. Come here. He's going to show you his hair. Look how long it is. Did you read the book, you guys?
I'm not finished, but I started. Well done.
Turn around.
Bill's hair, I mean, that's not terrible. It's shorter than George's.
Yeah.
It's curly here. It's like it's curling around his ears. Well, let
I
me
call them wings. I
Good.
call them wings.
Yeah.
Wings. I know. That's what he has.
We'll go with my kilt.
Oh, yeah. He's going to wear a kilt. Yeah. You got to come. You're coming to the wedding. You're invited. Rye's wedding.
When?
Save the date, October 10th.
Whoa. I have why would you get married in October? October 1st is duck season. Come on.
It's funny because it's a 3-day weekend. He's in the military and he wants to be able to celebrate his anniversary on a 3-day weekend, and that kind of works out with his squadron schedule. So
that's how my wife and I did it on our wedding. It was Labor Day weekend.
Well, honestly, it's the same weekend I got married to his dad. So
we had our wedding on a Sunday, so I didn't have to close my company.
So it's on a Sunday. So yeah, I'll get you the details. But it's at the Military Aviation Museum, which is a private, beautiful museum down here in Virginia Beach. And check this out. 2 of the airplanes in there are one I actually flew and one my dad flew.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's not ironic. There you go.
So I think that's the perfect note to that's awesome for you. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
and it's been so awesome to be able to talk to you.
Nice talking to you guys. I'll be up there. I mean, good. Now that I know I can hug you guys and nobody's going to freak out, that makes me happy.
No.
Oh, okay.
Huey really
so
likes
we
it.
are we bought a place
I put a moratorium on
About-
dogs.
2 miles away from your mom's place.
No way. Where?
We're down 103 towards Kittery.
Good for you. Lovely.
We've got 3,500 square feet, and you are always welcome.
I will say thank you because I'm
And-
sorry but Kim and Barry are there, and Travis, my nephew, he's flying. He flew in the Navy, retired. He's flying for Atlas. He's flying cargo, Amazon, I think now, but he's there and he's on Century Hill. So
Amazon.
Well, and that's, your brother lives just down the road from me.
Yeah, Josh is, of course, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I wasn't forgetting him. Anyway, think about half of my siblings are up there in New York. In fact, I would land in Portland. I'd overnight and I'd see Sue and Kim and Josh. I've seen them before.
The only time we hear from, but we'll go back to the dog thing. It's like we get a call from Sally at like 9 o'clock. It's like, they only gave me a Volvo. Can you give it a car? It's like, sure.
Yeah.
Drive to Boston, change the car.
You guys were awesome. You're awesome. Listen, if I do this big airlift, you guys have to help me.
Gladly.
Yeah.
Anytime. I've got a truck. We don't have any equine animals yet. That's until George builds his new house.
Yep.
And then
Tell me when it's time.
he does owe my mother a horse already, and I believe he owes my daughter.
A pony.
You want a pony or a mini horse?
No, do a pony. Look, I'll get you some rescue ones. You guys talk to me.
Yeah. Sally,
Yeah.
Sally said, don't ever get anything. Talk to me. I'll get you whatever.
And that's the plan. But we just have chickens. We've got, I don't know if you've heard the squawking, but there's 16 hens. They're about, 3 months old.
Oh, good.
And then we've got another. We started with what do we have out there? We had 18. We're down to 8 big chickens now.
All because of me.
Yeah, this is all his fault.
I hate chickens.
Huey hates
but I know
chickens.
how to sell them.
5 years ago, he convinced my wife to get 6 chickens.
Who hates birds?
Who my wife absolutely hates any bird.
How about that for sales?
That's funny.
Yeah, he could. You talk about selling ice to an Eskimo. You're talking about selling
Chickens to a woman.
chickens to a woman.
It's an avian anxiety.
Yeah.
He does really? I mean, I've heard of that. Like some people are birds scared.
Oh,
of
she
birds.
was deathly afraid of birds. I mean, except she would kill a duck,
Call me
which
Dr. Phil.
Has killed ducks.
has killed ducks, and
probably happy killing ducks if she.
exactly. But
Yeah.
would pick them up, and then we get these chickens, and she's out there doing yoga with a goddamn chicken. So
We used to get fainting goats. They have goat yoga, and we do puppy rescue yoga.
All right. That seals it. You are never meeting my wife. I will not let that happen because I'll end up with a pony, an island dog.
It'll change your life. I can't say for the better, but it'll change your life.
yeah,
Yeah.
it will change it. That's for sure. Have a couple kids on top of that, you'll
Yeah.
be fine.
You'll be good to go. You'll be good to go.
Well, Sally, thank you very much for
Hey,
coming
thank you
on.
guys. It's great talking to you.
Thank you
like
so much.
I feel like I'm home. So thanks for that.
Well, come home anytime, and you're always welcome. And anytime you want to talk about anything,
All right. Well, I'll be in touch. I'll stay in touch with you guys, and as soon as we get a break in this virus and this pandemic, I'll be up there.
I think the riots just ended the virus, so we're good.
I know. Listen, just go to stage 4, whatever. Like with everything going on. Okay, let's just.
I don't know whether to bring a mask or a rifle.
I
Yeah,
know.
both.
Yeah.
I know.
On again.
My husband's got ours locked and like chambered right here. He goes like, if there's ever, because there was riots around here. I'm like, oh my god. So yeah, we've got around chambered, ready to go. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there's a firearms within arm's reach of
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah. Well, we're all on the same page with that. So.
Yeah.
You guys, great. Thanks for including me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Great talking with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good.